Hello YouTube friends, I hope this finds you all well. Today's project is an applique quilt panel, and it's actually using a pattern that I have created. This is a PDF downloadable pattern available through my Etsy store, and I will put a link down below in the description of this video. So I'm going to take you through my process of creating this applique. It can be a wall hanging. You can actually take it even further and incorporate it into a lap quilt, twin size bed quilt, even a full size bed. However large you want to go, it'll be all just about how many borders do you want to add and how big do you want to make this. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and get started with this. I will see you on the other side. So the first thing that you need to do, obviously, is to print out the pattern pieces that you need for this project. Numbers that are indicated on the instructions say to print pages 4 through 12. Now, you might look at this and say, wait a minute, I'm printing the pattern twice. Yes, you are, but one is a placement pattern, which would be pieces 5 through 9. And here you can see that I've already taped them together. And then the other pages of the owl, which is 10 through 12. These are the applique shapes, and you can see that right there, applique shapes. This applique shapes are a mirror image of the placement pattern, and you need that because of the way that you end up drawing out your shapes onto the fusible web. So what you need to do for putting these pieces together, and this works for both the applique placement and the applique shapes, is that anywhere on the pages where you see the little scissors, that's the line that you need to cut on. On page 10, it actually has a 1-inch square on there, and you should actually be measuring that just to ensure that your piece has printed at actual size. If it's not measuring at 1 inch, then you need to be fixing the settings on your printer to print actual size. Okay, and then this page actually has no cutting lines, just alignment lines. All right, so then instructions tell you to take pages 10 and 11, to take 9 and 10 and align them on line B. So here is line B. This one has been left uncut and this one has been cut. So then we're just going to take the two pieces and put them together, just matching the lines. Okay, and then when I tape this, because I'm going to be tracing these lines, using the pencil, I try not to put the tape on any of the actual drawing lines. Try to put tape in the spaces in between. Take pages 11 and 12 and align them on line C. The things the instructions say is don't try aligning the numbers. This is all about the shapes. The numbers are not going to help you usually in this case. So just make sure the lines for each of your shapes, they line up on the dotted line. Take the bottom half and the top half and align them on line A. Again, just matching the line shape. Now, if you can't get it to where the lines are super smooth, then get it as close as you can. When you come to the part where you're tracing out your pattern, just make your line smooth. as best as you can. It'll work out fine. All right, and so there we have our applique shape pages 9 through 12 all put together. Now there are a lot of pieces to this applique, and if you aren't wanting to do all the pieces in this brow area right here, you can actually eliminate those pieces, and I've indicated that in the instructions, and you can substitute all these individual little pieces with the brow piece, which is number 54. So you go ahead and make that determination. But what I'm going to be doing now is I have my fusible web. If you've never used it before, it has a rough side. That's the adhesive side, and it has a smooth side. So what I'll be doing is taking the fusible web, and I will be placing it rough side down over my pattern and then tracing out all my shapes. Now this pattern does have spaces in between all of the shapes, but I actually want to leave more space than what the pattern shows here because I need to cut out each piece roughly. I do not want to cut directly on the line. That's going to happen later after these have been fused to your fabric. So I have my pencil here, and I'm going to go ahead and just start tracing out all of my pattern shapes and making sure to write the numbers on them so that it's easier to know later on what piece I'm working with. So I'll just go ahead and trace, let's see. Well, let's just do the eye first, and one of the reasons for that is when it comes to the eye, I'm tracing out each of the shapes. There's three large circular shapes. I'm going to be tracing out all of them all the way, the whole shape for all of them. So here's the biggest one. And then I'll move away because these are three separate shapes, so I'll move away. And the big one is number 48, so I'll be sure to write 48 on there. And then move away and do one of the next size. And that one is size piece 36. And then we have the small one. So do each of those separately, leaving enough room, and I actually got these a little too close right here, but I'll manage with that one. Leaving room in between them to cut them out and have extra space away from the line. Now I will tell you, the eyes have glint shapes in them, and if you want to use the fabric for that, I would go ahead and trace those out. You'll know what they are. They're very, very small pieces if that's what you decide to do, which is fine. There are other options. You can use some fabric paint, and then you could also use stitching lines. There's some white thread that you could use to make those shapes as well. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm actually going to be using, I think I've decided to go ahead and use my stitching to do that, my free motion stitching. All right, this, actually, I wrote down, yeah, this is 53, this little one here. All right, so I will go ahead and continue tracing all of the shapes using my pencil, and that'll take a while, so I'll be back later on. One of the things that you're going to notice on the color chart, which is on page 4 of your instructions, is that I have divided the colors into letter groups A, B, C, all the way through H. And I've divided each of the pieces into those different color groups. Now, whether or not you decide to do this particular colorway, that's entirely up to you. But I would recommend, as you're cutting your pieces from your tracings that you just did of all the applique shapes, is that you take each of the numbers and then divide them into the groups A, B, and C, and so forth. So all my pieces 1 through 9 are going to go into a pile together under color group A, and so forth. You can see down here on the optional brow piece all the numbers that you can eliminate from the pieces to cut out by just substituting with the one brow piece. I've drawn all my shapes out onto the fusible web, and it is time to cut them out. Now what I've done, and I recommend you doing this as well, is I have some containers here where I've put labels in them from A to H. And as I'm cutting each of my pieces out, I will refer to my color chart and I will find out which group that particular number goes to. So if I cut out piece number 1, which is this one here, I'll look to my chart and it's a color A. So I will put that in the container that has the A label. That way, once I have all the pieces cut out, all I have to do is grab one little container and take it to the one fabric and adhere that to just that one fabric. Nothing gets mixed up or lost. So I'm going to go ahead and cut out all my shapes, and I'm going to cut out roughly. I want to leave, you know, at least more than 1/4 inch all the way around my shapes, and I've left plenty of space around each of them. We're going to be cutting these very specifically once they've been ironed onto the fabric. These are the colors that I have chosen for my applique. Now they're pretty close to what I have written down on the color chart. Obviously you do not have to do this colorway. You can do your own. I would just recommend using the color chart as far as the groupings, you know, putting A's, the numbers that I have assigned to color A, do that because it just makes it really easy. I've done the work as far as separating the pieces evenly throughout the piece. Now this is my A, and then B, C, D, E, F, G, and then H is my black. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over so the A is on top. And I'm going to make it really simple for myself. I'm just going to take my A color and I'm going to put it in my container with my A pieces. And I'm going to do that with all of the fabrics. And then when I come back, we'll be arranging our pieces onto the back side of the fabric and getting ready to adhere them. Okay, this is my A container. So I'm going to take my fabric out, open it up, and before I put my pieces on there, I'm actually going to go ahead and press it. Make sure everything's flat, and I'm going to be doing this everything from the wrong side of the fabric. Iron, no steam. Because this fabric is not directional, I'm not worried about how the pieces are arranged on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and start putting them all on here, and I've got the sticky or rough side of the paper facing down onto the back side of the fabric. And it's really easy for them to fly away and get lost. So now I'm going to go ahead and take the parchment paper, lay that over the top, and give this all a really good press onto the fabric. Now all I'm going to do is just cut out this section that I have all these pieces glued on. And then I'm just going to set this aside for right now and finish the rest of the ironing on of all the pieces. And once I have all of them done just like this, then I'll start cutting them out individually, all the pieces. When you printed out your pages that I indicated in the instructions, and that would have been pages 4 through 12, I believe, you will have 2 sheets that look similar, but they are different because one is your applique shapes. These are the shapes that you should be tracing your fusible web over. And then this is the actual applique placement. So this is the one that we're going to be using to trace onto our background fabric. And so if you have a light box, take this one and your background fabric and trace it onto your background fabric using a light pencil or a heat erase pen that you have for fabric, whatever it is that you have. If you have something like a pencil and it's not erasable, just, you know, go right inside the lines so that you don't see that once your applique pieces are on there. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't have my light box here on the boat. Tape this on the window, tape my fabric over it, and trace my shapes onto here. All right, it's probably difficult to see, but I do have my pattern traced out onto my background fabric. Something that I did do was I folded my fabric into fours just to mark the center, and I was able to place it centered over the pattern, the placement pattern. So I did not write any of the numbers down onto the fabric. I do have my placement piece pattern right here next to me so that I have that as a reference if I need it. And I'm just going to go ahead and start towards the center and work my way out from there. And I just have all my pieces in the container here, and I'm just going to start, you know, laying them out from the center. I'll find the piece where it belongs. And then what I'll end up doing after I've taken the paper off the back, and if you've never done it before, just take a pin and score the paper, and then that'll be easier to grab that to peel it off. But I will actually just take the tip of my iron and just tack it right in the center before I actually place this completely down. I'm just going to tack it into place, maybe a couple spots, and then continue laying this out. Once I have it all laid out, then I will go ahead and press them all down together. All right, I'll go ahead and get that started. You could actually stop at this point. You don't need to do the flowers and the butterfly. If you don't want to, you can just do the owl, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm going to go ahead and add those elements. Now, I didn't put placement on the pattern. It's generalized. You know, each flower goes on the end of the stem or the branch that the owl is sitting on. And I'm going to turn the flowers just so that it actually covers the blunt end of each side of the stick or the branch that the owl is sitting on. So I'll go ahead and do that next. All right, well, now I'm going to go ahead and get my cotton batting and my backing fabric and go ahead and put together the quilt sandwich. Now, before I put my quilt sandwich together, I'm just going to go over everything one more time really well with my iron, just to ensure that there is a solid bond between the fabrics. All right, I have my quilt sandwich made, and I have it also basted with safety pins. And I just wanted to show you, this is the fabric that I've chosen for the backing. Typically when I'm putting together my quilt pieces, I cut the top piece to the size that I want, and then the batting and the backing fabric don't get trimmed down to size until after I get all the stitching on the piece done. So that will get evened up and squared off later on after all the stitching is finished. So I'm going to go ahead and take this to the machine, and I'm going to start doing some free motion quilting first before I do any of the stitching around the raw edges. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about my machine setup real quick here. I'm going to be doing free motion quilting, so I do have my free motion quilting foot on and my feed dogs are dropped. I have a quilting thread that's a 40 weight. It's a beautiful shiny polyester thread. I do have a gray thread on the back that should blend in well with the backing fabric, and I'm using an all-purpose thread on the bobbin. My needle is an 8011 quilting needle. And let's see, what else do I have? I think that's probably about all I need to say about that. So I'm going to go ahead and do some free motion quilting. And with this, you know, just if you need to roll up any of your edges so that you can move freely with your piece, do so. And also, if you need to, I have here like a little chalk pencil, and I can just give myself a couple of lines to kind of generally follow those, just if I want equal spacing, you know, just to kind of keep things even or something. But I'm not really drawing out a pattern, just drawing some guidelines. I ended up switching my top thread to black just because I don't feel like the gray was going to show up quite enough. And for the look that I want, I really want it to show up well, and black will do that. Everything else is the same. I brought my bobbin thread up, and I'll go ahead and start. The air conditioning is just turned on, so it's fairly loud right now. I'm going to be doing zigzag stitching all the way around the raw edges of my applique pieces. I have my stitch width set to a 3.0 and my stitch length to a 1.6. It is not a satin stitch. It is fairly close. Just wanted to show you the stitch that I'm doing around the edge, and I'm using that dark gray thread, which I love. It kind of can come across as being purple or blue, gray. It's a really great color. So I have these lines on my foot, and there's 3 of them, 1, 2, 3, and the one on the right is the edge that I'm using to follow along
the fabric. By doing that, my needle hits on the outside right here and then goes to the inside. So it's all about playing with whatever foot that you have and making the adjustments that you need to make. I'm going to go ahead and start sewing now and just showing you how that runs along that edge. Now this is a gentle curve, so I can just slowly turn my fabric without having to stop and lift and pivot. But as I'm coming to the end of this edge, I'm on an outside corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, my foot is down, I'm going to lift the foot, and I'm going to pivot this piece because I want that one line to continue following my fabric the way I showed you. And that is going to make it so that it's a nice edge all the way through. Now, when I'm doing an outside corner, and if you're not sure what an outside corner is a corner that curves away from the inside panel that I'm working on. So this is curving in towards this panel. So this would be an inside corner. This is curving out away from the inside of the fabric area. So that would be an outside corner. So when I'm doing an outside corner and I need to pivot with my needle down, I always put my needle down on the outside. This would be the inside, this is the outside. Lift my foot, and then I can pivot just a little bit. I make it so that my lines continue to be nice and straight on the outside and don't get funky looking. Okay, so I would need to turn again. So put my needle down on the outside, which would be right on the line of the fabric that I'm following. Sorry, I'm having to hold on to this while I do this so I can give you a good angle of everything. All right. And then I continue sewing. Now this is still an outside line and I need to pivot a little bit more. So I'm putting my needle down on the outside. Now I can turn. I can follow that fabric. There we go. So I would do the opposite if I'm on an inside corner. I would put my needle down on the left side, which would be the inside corner, to make my turns. So I hope that helps. It's really difficult for me to show it to you because I can't get the right camera angle with my stand. I have all the edge stitching done on this piece, and before I do the free motion quilting in all the white background fabric, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my 1/4 inch foot on, and I'm just going to outline 1/4 inch away from the outside of the applique, and then that will just kind of delineate between the background and the applique when I go to do the free motion quilting. I am going to switch my top thread to a white color just to match with that. I don't want it to stand out. I want it to be very much in the background. Okay, I've switched to a 1/4 inch foot. I've also switched my stitch to a straight stitch, and I'm using a 3.0 stitch length. Now, when it comes to outlining this, I'm not going to be going in every little, corner like this and going in and out. I'm just going to do a general shape, just keeping with the 1/4 inch distance, and that should come across just fine. I've outline stitched the entire applique, and so now I am ready to do the free motion quilting on the rest of the white background area. I'm just going to do a meander stitch, and I'm going to go ahead and go all the way to the edges of the panel. I have the quilting all done around the applique, and there's one more thing that I want to do before I go to the next step, and that's putting the glimmer in the eyes of the owl. And I'm going, since I have everything set up for free motion quilting already, I'm going to use a zigzag stitch and then just with using white thread create that glimmer right there in both of the eyes. And square up this panel. I've trimmed my quilt and it's down to 22 inches wide by 29 inches tall. And so what I'm doing now is I took 1-inch strips of fabric and I folded them in half, and I'm going to be sewing them around the perimeter of the quilt panel. And what I did is I'm just lining up the raw edge of the strip to the raw edge of the panel, and each one is cut to the length of the panel side that it's on. And then I will sew that on using just a little bit less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance, because I will be adding borders on using the 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I don't want this first stitch to show up. Well, there you have it. It's all completed as far as the applique itself, and I do have the one border put on there. I think I'm actually going to end up finishing this into a lap quilt at least, but I just wanted to take you through the steps in the process of making the applique. Hope you enjoyed that, and I hope this finds you all happy and healthy. And until next time, have a great one. Bye for now.